The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Hey, welcome back to the Boss Hole Chronicles. I'm Sarah Best, your co-host. It's good to be back with you. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host and cool man, John Brower. John, how are you?
Cool man, John. Thank you for that. I'm good, Sarah. I'm good. Always excited to do a podcast with you. I'm very excited today because we have not only an amazing member of the Boss Hole Transformation Nation and the work that she does, but she's a good friend. And we've been waiting for this opportunity to have her on here, but it's good to see you.
You too, John. And I agree. It's really helpful to hear from what I consider true boots on the ground. Like, this is a practitioner who has been on the front line of, designing strategies to develop leaders more wholly, building teams and helping to bring organizational health to the forefront. That's really been the nature of her career. So, John, I'll just toss it over to you. And if you would introduce our guest for today.
Happy to do that. We have an amazing individual. And as I said, we have known Alexis Smith for quite a few years. And before I give her credentials and a little bit of her background, Alexis, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, happy to be here.
So Alexis is currently serving as the Chief People Officer at Farmers and Merchants State Bank based in Archbold, Ohio. And good thing, too, because they are on a rapid growth trajectory right now. It's really quite amazing to see what they're doing. We actually met Alexis in her organizational excellence role in a previous organization, but everything in her background points to working with people, helping people find the best versions of themselves, developing them. And more importantly, Alexis is a really strong people developer of her own direct reports. And we've had some great conversations over the years with her, especially through the pandemic and creative ways that they've addressed what's going on. But we are so glad to have her here to talk about her work around what's happening and what she's seeing relative to managers and leaders and leadership development. We'll dive into that in just a second. But one thing that I think is really cool is that Alexis not only has an undergraduate degree, but also a graduate degree in Latin. Isn't that right, Alexis?
True story.
Yes, true story. And
absolutely.
The only reason I think that's so amazing is, first of all, it speaks to just how powerful and strong of a learner she is. And then at the other side of it, I remember in my arrogance and audacity as a captain, my freshman year in college, I had taken 2 years of French, and I've shared this with Alexis. I took 2 years of French and didn't enjoy it, but I didn't pass out of my language requirement at school. And so I thought, I want to learn a new language. I'm going to take Latin. And I lasted one semester and it absolutely ate me alive. Mm-hmm. Agricola, I think, is the one word that I remember, which means farmer. Alexis, is that correct?
That is correct.
I can't conjugate that anymore. But anyway, no, it's great to have you here. And we're so pleased that you're on the podcast. So we're going to talk about just what you're doing around your observations in your work, specifically around leaders and leadership development. Why don't we start with one thing that I think was cool is how you said, or your perspective on what is turning managers into boss holes. I mean, what is leading them down the path? What have you been seeing?
Again, thank you for having me here today. I love spending time with the two of you also. So as you said, I am an observer of people. So I spend a lot of time watching people, and maybe that's also my degrees in studying ancient history. People have acted the same way since the beginning of time, probably since Adam. Mm. So if you can just take a look and see, you can really gain some insight. But I was thinking about this question in the Boss Hole Chronicles when I told people I was going to be on the podcast. They sort of chuckle again at the title, but then everybody always says, oh yeah, I know one of those. So everybody knows one. So really some of the insight, I think, when you look at people's path in leadership, and particularly as they rise into executive positions, the farther you go in an organization in general, the more removed you become from people, from the frontline individuals within the organization. And personally, I think it's this loss of perspective that turns someone into a boss hole. So, whether you want to call it emperor's new clothes, or whether you want to call it the echo chamber of the C-suite, whatever it might be, the fact of the matter is people in an organization don't always speak the truth to leaders or to executives. And so once this starts happening a lot, you get to see and notice that someone starts to think that all of their opinions are fact and all of their opinions are correct, because nobody is contradicting them, nobody is challenging them. And so when they start to hear that in that echo chamber, then more starts coming out of their mouth and less starts going in their ears. And they're not listening. So when that loss of perspective becomes hubris and becomes arrogance, then the leader really shuts down and stops listening, and starts dictating and telling. And then you really see, that's to me the first start down the path to boss hole.
Yeah.
Is again this loss, because you walk the road to boss hole on your own, right? Because you're not bothering to look around to see if anybody. There's not a team of boss holes. Boss hole
dragging you down the pathway. Right.
That's right. That's right. And I actually don't think it's necessarily someone's personality or their leadership style. I'm a strong venturer, got a captain, promoter. You can lead when you talk about predictive index, you can lead from any role or any leadership style. But I think when you really stop listening and you just go into that individual perspective, that's when we start seeing people really become boss holes. The walls start going up.
Yeah, I love that idea, the metaphor of the echo chamber. And it's so true, because the only voice, when you eliminate those other voices, the only one you hear is your own, and it sounds right all the time. And Alexis, you have worked so Farmers and Merchants is compared to your previous two organizations, much smaller. Correct. Is that correct?
Yep.
Do you see that trend, if you will, or that occurrence, a dynamic of getting away from the front line and just hearing your own voice? Is it more prevalent in larger organizations, or does that really not make a distinction? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
You know what? I think it's easier to feel disconnected in a larger organization, just because there are so many people. But leadership takes effort. And so whether you're in an organization of 20,000 people or 200 people, a leader can choose to sit in their office all day long and never talk to someone, or can choose to go out and connect with people. That's a leadership choice, regardless of the size of the organization.
That's a good point.
Because there are good listeners in large corporations, and there are bad listeners in small corporations. So
I think that's a great insert for emotional intelligence and adaptation, because oftentimes we see leaders who are more private and introspective and analytical and in their own minds, and their comfort level is looking at the numbers and being at their desk and, looking at all the monitors and the results and the dashboards. And it's not quite their comfort zone, nor would it naturally occur to them to think that I should go engage some people on the floor. So that's another place where I think, you make a great runway of understanding here that bosses need to adapt, like in many cases, do what is not natural to them for the good of their direct reports, their team, to improve results, et cetera. And we do that by way of emotional intelligence. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we all have to adapt, because as a leader, you are in service to your team.
That's right.
And so we see that, especially when we talk a little bit about trends in leadership and really the world that we're in today.
Yeah.
Your job as a leader is to focus on your team. your only success comes through them. And so, yeah, that adaptation is extremely important.
And I really want to emphasize that point. You're in service to them, not the other way around.
Correct.
They're not serving you. It reminds me of an episode we did around the hero and the guide. You're not the hero in a management or supervisory role. You're the guide. You're shepherding their success, and it's through their success that you will be successful. That's a critical point.
Can I jump in, John? Absolutely. Can I just say that too? I think about the many leaders, men and women, who are probably sitting at their desk or, in their location, wondering, when are they going to figure out, I don't know what I'm doing. There's that notion that no one is born to be a boss hole. And, leaders find themselves in these situations where adaptation is required and called for, but they've probably never had to do that before, or they don't know how to exactly do that. And they don't want to sound stupid. So just a nod to those particular individuals that might in fact be wondering, how do I even do this? Or am I even doing this effectively? I want to serve, I have this desire to serve, but this is how I am. Like, this is what I do. How do I change that? Just a note on that.
Well, this old idea that a manager, a leader has to know all the answers and know everything and be almost above where the rest of their team is. Well, that's just not true.
Right.
You're a human being. And actually, the team doesn't expect you to know more than they do, but they do expect you to be a model of consistency, a model of stability. It's the behavior that you're role modeling, not the knowledge that you have, that makes you a great leader.
Yeah. Well said.
So, Alexis, what are you seeing in terms of trends? You have been in a people leadership and people development role for a variety of organizations, and as we had mentioned, of different sizes. What have you been seeing that is really noticeable and is something our listeners should be paying attention to?
So, thinking about this question, I know it sounds cliche, but really strong leadership is more critical than ever. And I know every year people say, leadership development, and there's a new program and there's a new poll on why leadership is important. But it is different now. I think because where we would see a need to develop future leaders or help those that are new to leadership, now we're really seeing a need to develop and lead differently at all levels. So the work environment has changed radically over the past 2 years, and organizations need strong leadership to guide them through what's really a dynamic workplace now. So you have the effects of the pandemic, which everyone has talked to death about, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. However, to me, the most interesting piece of the last 3 years has been this acceleration of trends that we already saw coming. So retirement of baby boomers, multiple generations in the workplace, flex work arrangements, all of those things. We saw them coming. We knew they were coming. However, I think all of us thought it would be a transition and you could work through the kinks as you went. So you had this gradual incline that then really not even in 2020, but I saw it in 2021, became a cliff when everyone started back into the workplace. And so now you have leaders at all levels having to rethink how they lead. Right? So there are many leaders, especially what you might call seasoned leaders, those that have been in the workplace for a long time, that 5 years ago would have never imagined that they needed to focus on employee well-being, not just engagement, on the mental wellness of the organization, of leading employees that now really have a contractor mindset of how they approach the workplace. And oh, by the way, they're also not physically with you all the time within that workplace.
Right.
I mean, imagine 5 years ago, if you had asked leaders, there's no way they would have those topics would have come up. Maybe in some tech industries, but certainly not in traditional industries. So the executive competencies, those leadership competencies, they still exist. The what of articulating vision, driving results, relationships, all of that. But how these are executed in the workplace, I think, has really changed. And so you've got these challenges where it's really the speed with which our leaders need to work on these skills, right? We used to have time. You used to have an individual development plan where you could get a leader up to speed within 12 months. Well, the environment's changed and the job market has changed such that employees can be and are less tolerant of leaders that aren't meeting their needs.
Right.
So you see that a lot. Like, you are not meeting my needs. So, we live in this customizable society, right? Your phones are customized. Everything is customized to you. It's feeding you your TikTok For You page, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it's become employees think about who's meeting my needs.
Right.
So it's similar. A leader now has to look at their whole team, and let's sort of use them like each of them has their own interface. And a leader has to go in and quickly figure out what's important to them and how can I support that.
Right.
So now you have to develop your skills very quickly and decide, do I have to get everyone focused on a common goal. And I have to be a coach to some, a mentor to others, a role model to some, a teacher. And those are 4 very different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of these nuances, while they're also having to navigate their own environment. To Sarah's point, many times feeling like a fish out of water. I mean, there are a lot of leaders with that imposter syndrome going, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. And so these challenges are, what I'm seeing is, it's exhausting. I hear that from a lot of leaders. I'm exhausted. And we never heard that from leaders before. Over the last, you would have leaders that said, boy, I can't stand dealing with this people stuff, right?
Yes.
But it wasn't mentally exhausting them. And so when you talk about burnout, you are seeing leaders burning out because they are in the middle of a changing environment and a demanding workforce, and they're trying to navigate it, and there's not a lot of support for them on either side right now.
The point you made, I'm kind of fascinated, by giving somebody the perspective. Go take yourself back 5 years. And if somebody came up to you and said, you will not be working from a home office anymore, it will be empty. You won't see your people maybe but once a month or maybe once a quarter, if at all. People would have been dismissive, saying, you're crazy. That's nuts. How can we do business that way? And that's but you're right. How we do it and how we approach it is so critical. Well, let me ask you this, Alexis, as it relates to burnout, because we hear a lot about that. As it relates to burnout, do you think part of that is because managers and supervisors so we are all about a person's behavioral DNA, using analytics to really understand what makes a person tick. A one size fits all will never, ever work. That was tried before. But do you think part of that burnout or that exhaustion comes from just not knowing how to reach an individual person or individual members of a team because managers or bosses just keep guessing at it? This may be too obtuse a question, but does that make any sense?
I think it's actually, in this environment, probably easier to be a boss hole than it is to be a strong leader, because a boss hole says, this is me, and you're all going to accept me for who I am, and I'm going to lead from where I am. To Sarah's point, no adaptation. But the strong leaders that want to be successful realize that the pressure from your team and employees now to be individualized for me, right? This is what I want. I need a coach today and a mentor tomorrow. And they're trying to almost be all things to all people, which is a recipe for disaster.
Right.
And it is exhausting. It's exhausting to them. And we've changed so rapidly. I don't think there are a lot of tools or support. That's where I think you're really going to see this rise in coaching at all levels. That you really, coaching used to be at an executive level. That's
Right.
really where they would bring in coaching. And we're actually looking at bringing it in at some different levels within the organization, because people need a third party perspective. They need a sounding board. And if you can support your leaders, they're going to do a better job supporting your employees. We
For
put
sure.
so much on leaders' shoulders. It's no wonder some of them turn into boss holes. That's
I mean, we've talked about Lencioni's June 2020 book called The Motive, as a resource for leaders to kind of evaluate at their heart place, why they're in the position that they're in. And we've also talked often about how in organizations, sometimes the only way to advance is to become a leader, a manager, a supervisor, and eventually, we want to make our way to the top so we get status and higher pay, and how that's a great way to push people into the boss hole zone too, because they don't necessarily want to or shouldn't be a leader. But in The Motive, he talks about, what is your why for doing this? And for even the leaders that have a significant why of responsibility centered focus, like I want to serve my people, this is a tough time and it's challenging and it's burned out. And I can imagine they might be thinking, I don't have time to do all those things, or I don't even know how to develop the skill to do all those things. So you make a good point. If we kind of boil it down a little bit, I would ask Alexis, like, what advice would you give a leader who feels a sense of overwhelm or burnout, but appreciates and understands, I really need to treat each of my direct reports as a significant individual. I got to draw the best performance out of that person. What might you say to them?
Again, as we said before, you've got to ask a question and then listen. Because we are in an environment now where people, employees, they will tell you exactly what they want.
Right.
So if you're willing to listen and show some vulnerability, you can make it through, right? It is exhausting and it is difficult, and recognizing you can't be everything to everyone. But today, this is what I can be. So
that's so good.
I mean, there's many times that I will say to my team, I have no idea what we're supposed to be doing right now.
Yes.
But together we're going to figure it out. It's okay to say, this is my first time through this. Let's roll. But, we're going to make some mistakes, but let's pick it up and keep going. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present, right? That's really what people want. They don't want perfection.
And authentic, just real. Just, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even if they're remote, they want connection. So.
They do. And we can be remote and still have connection. What you said makes me think about the importance of self-awareness. Leaders need to appreciate and understand what pops up in their thoughts that could prevent them, from being able to listen. Thoughts like, you have no idea, how hard it was when I started out in your job. Like, you have no idea what I had to go through to get here. I don't know why you're belly aching. John and I were part of a session last week.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
We were talking to a group of business owners, and they were picking up what we were putting down as best they could, I think. But one gentleman said, okay, here's, I'm just going to be honest with these younger folks, like, can't you just put your big boy pants on or big girl pants on and suck it up and do the work? Like, we all just do the work. And everybody kind of chuckled and laughed. And it's a mindset. And I think that self-awareness, that emotional intelligence that leaders need to have is really nothing more than recognize it's like a pop-up or, the thing that pops up on your screen that now we have all the software that takes that out of our view. And the pop-up is like, that's really stupid, or, you don't know what you're talking about, or you have no idea how hard it was for me when I did that. We have to be aware enough to move those to the side to say, this is a different experience for this person. So there's the skill of empathy. You take the self-awareness, that, hey, I feel frustration. Why do I feel that way? Because this person seems wussy. And
Mhm.
then you use empathy to say, but you know what? This is their experience. So I need to tune into it, try to understand it, and believe that that's the truth for them, and
Right.
find a way to help them cope. That's
Mhm.
a good segue there, Alexis. And by the way, this guy was great. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he was just being honest and vulnerable, and kind of testing out. Like, I know I probably shouldn't do that. Like, I shouldn't go to somebody and say, "Give me your man card." Like, you're done. Like that. That's enough complaining from you. Can't do that anymore. No. But what can you do? And these are the things that you're talking about.
Well, I have a question really quick, Alexis, relative to one of the things we warn organizations about sort of inadvertently pushing managers into the boss hole zone is maybe selecting the wrong people or for the wrong reasons, putting them into a management or supervisory role. What are you doing in your current capacity to avoid that, or just make sure that we are vetting people to make sure that they're right for the role to develop other people?
Well, again, as far as data goes, here comes my plug for PI, but we do heavily use the predictive index, not as a decisioning tool, but as a point of data to
Mm-hmm.
understand, quite frankly, whether that individual will be happy doing the role of a leader. And we've talked about that. You need different types of leaders for different types of projects, departments, companies. Where we are, we're building, we're growing.
Mm-hmm.
That takes I'm a strong venturer. I love that kind of stuff. Bring it on. But if we were in a maintenance mode, I'm not your gal. That
Mhm.
that's not where I'm going to be fulfilled. So using those points of data, we also use the relationship guides to see how they're going to connect with the other individuals in their team.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to sit here and say, "Oh, we do such a great job of vetting people who are moving into management roles or supervisory roles." Um, but we've got a lot to learn, and we can always do it better. I think, as I said, one of our challenges in the environment we're in today, huge positive, we have more internal movement than we've seen in a long time.
Mm.
Wow.
So even 5 years ago, you might say, "Hey, Betty, she needs another year of experience before she would be ready for the supervisory role." Well, we don't have that candidate pool. We don't have that luxury in the market now.
Right.
So now we're saying, "Hey, if Betty's 75% ready, let's go,"
Mm.
because she's acclimated to the culture. She fits all of those pieces, and we can get her schooled up on the content. However, again, what are you doing? You're adding more work to the leaders that are already there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now the leader not only has to bring Betty in as a new supervisor onto their team, but also get them fill that 25% gap that perhaps we didn't have before. So
Right.
there are challenges that go with that, but at least we recognize those challenges and are trying to fill those.
Yeah. Well, and as you are in acquisition mode, and you have been for the I mean, since you started there for the last couple of years, it has been a steady clip of acquisition. Every time you acquire a local or regional bank, I mean, you are acquiring potentially people in management and supervisory roles that just have not been equipped, enabled. Maybe they don't even want to be there, and you have to deal with that, which compounds the challenge. But certainly being aware of how to help them grow and develop, you've got some tools to just take the guesswork out of it. That makes a lot of sense.
Alexis, I have a question for you. You've spent a lot of your career as a manager, leader of others, of teams, developer of people. Have you ever been a boss hole? And if so, how did you address that? And what do you do today to prevent boss hole-ish behavior?
Well, is there really a boss hole out there that says, "Yep, I'm a boss hole"? Isn't that,
We met someone last week. We did. He came up to us and he said, "I'm an active boss hole right now." And we said, "Oh, we got get a microphone. We have to talk to you, sir."
Well, I would like to think I haven't been a boss hole, but I guess you would have to ask individuals that have worked for me in the past. or maybe the ones that work on my team now. I don't know. No, have I been reactionary? Absolutely. Have there been times where I talk far more than I listen? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Have I made very poor decisions as a leader? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I've learned lessons from all of those, and I have been truly lucky to have worked in environments where I could fail safely
Mm-hmm.
and fall forward, right?
Right.
And get up, and that speaks to many of the people that I've had the opportunity to have as my leaders and mentors in the past.
Yeah.
I've been very lucky that I've had some very strong mentors in my life, whether they be within the workplace or outside of the workplace.
Yeah.
And, my mom's Italian, so she keeps me in check.
Right. Thank God for your mom.
She'll tell me when I'm straying down the path. So
Yeah. Well, I think, it's safe to say for every single one of us, whether we lead people or process or not at all, we have a tendency to become challenging for others. And it has to do with understanding the way we're naturally wired and appreciating that when times get stressful and the heat rises and there's anxiety and potential burnout. So we default to extremes of those natural drives. Some of us are very independent and we like to do things our way. Some of us move way too fast. And so in times of stress and angst and even excitement, we default to those things by nature. So I think all of us have the propensity to be a boss hole. And it's just a matter of knowing when to dial in a particular drive of dominance, for example, or patience to slow down a little bit, to not spin so many plates, to actually, for me, it would be staying focused on the work that's right in front of me, because it's so enticing and exciting to jump to the next thing and to see a bright, shiny new opportunity. It's just those little adaptations and those moment by moment decisions that we make inside and interpersonally that I think increase our effectiveness, to be present and listen and try to understand other people.
Well, don't you think that goes back to just, the experiences of when you get into management early on in your career and the mistakes you make, people having the grace to, you admit it, people having the grace to forgive it. That's self-awareness, but Alexis, to your point, I'm with you. I'd like to think I wasn't a boss hole. I know I toyed with the boss hole zone and in early in my career, my reactions, my responses were like, I look back and go, oh, I could have handled that better. I could have done that better. It's when managers and supervisors aren't having those moments of growth and maturity and wisdom and insight and self-awareness that they just stay right there. And that's a tough thing to do, just to say, gosh, I did not handle that well. And I need to grow from that. We're just hoping all managers really take that away every single day.
And you know what, when you talk about experience, past experience, I think when you talk about this generation that's starting to retire from the workforce and sort of the clash that you might have between these generations, I think the greatest value that a leader who has been a leader within an organization or within their career for decades can provide is just that wisdom from experience, the grace for a younger leader to know, hey, you made a mistake. I've made the same mistake. It's okay. This is how you can learn from it. And put judgment aside and start to be a mentor to people, because we have new generations coming into the workforce. They have an enormous amount of capability and potential, but they don't have any wisdom, because you can only get wisdom through experience.
Right.
So the individuals, the leaders that have already failed many times over on the people front and have all been a boss hole and have had horrible experiences and very positive experience, that's the best thing they can do. To me, that's the best way to develop future leaders, you can teach them a bunch of content and send them to training classes and yada, yada, yada about competencies. But until they apply that and see a lesson, and we all know that you don't learn lessons from positive experiences. If you win all the time, you learn the most through failure.
Yeah.
So do we have an environment where leaders support young leaders and help guide them through those failures so that they can, brush themselves back up and get back out there, instead of sort of retreating in or burning out?
That's a great insight, Alexis. That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing this. This was so great. It's so good to see you as always, and keep up the amazing work at Farmers and Merchants Bank, and tell everybody we said hello. It's a great group you've got there.
It is. It's a fantastic group. So yeah, I will tell them. And we miss seeing you on a regular basis now that you've opened the Columbus branch. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We'll make that happen. Well, again, Alexis, thank you to our listeners. We'll have some key info for you in the show notes about how to reach out to Alexis should you wish to learn more about her approach and her experiences. But as always, we're glad to have you in our audience, and we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Boss Hole Chronicles. And if you have a Boss Hole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.